Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be making Lou Malnati's deep dish pizza, or at least getting close to it. We're going to start off with a 1 1/3 cups of warm water, not too hot though, 1 teaspoon of active dry yeast, 1 tablespoon of sugar. Just mix it up real quick. And then you're better off using a whisk just to break up the big clumps of the yeast. And this is sort of an ongoing recipe. This is like 7th or 8th iteration I've gone through trying to get close to making it right. There is a whole lot of data online about how to make this the right way. So now we're going to start off with our active yeast mixture. We're going to add in our cornmeal. And next is our shortening. So you could use shortening or lard. Either one's going to give you a similar result. I prefer to use shortening or bacon fat. Bacon fat adds a different flavor. That's obviously not anything like what they do at the restaurant, but it's up to you. Then we're going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil as well, and that's it for our wet ingredients for now. And there's also 2 tablespoons of melted butter that have already been put in there. And then for the flour, you don't want to just measure it. You want to go by weight. We're going to use 440 grams of flour for this. You're better off using bread flour, but I did this during COVID and you could not get bread flour. All I could get was all-purpose. So that's what we used here. It'll be a bit more crispy if you use bread flour instead of the all-purpose flour. There's also a teaspoon of salt in there. And that's it. Not a whole lot to it. Let it mix. Let it go for about 30 to 40 seconds. Before you come back, look at it, see if it's too wet or too dry. It'll vary in a small batch of this. It'll vary about how wet it is. To get it to the right consistency, you're going to also just add in some corn oil later on. I'll show you that here in a second. And so I'm just sort of adding enough to make it a certain wetness. It's kind of hard to explain how to do this. You can see how it sticks and falls off my fingers. You don't want it to be a dry ball of dough like you would in traditional pizza dough or bread dough. It's a bit wetter and stickier. This is sort of, you have to figure this out over a long time of doing it. Just get it all off of the dough hook here. It will dry up a little bit between when you mix it and when you actually use it. You have to at least give it a day for the yeast to do its thing in the refrigerator. Sometimes 2 days would be better, but it depends how much time you have in your hands. And so now you're going to cover it for 5 hours at room temperature. Then once it's been out for 5 hours at room temp, you're going to go ahead and put it in the fridge for at least a day, 2 days if you have the time. Now we're going to make the sauce. It's 2 days later. I've taken my dough out of the fridge, let it come to room temp for at least 2 hours, 3 if you have enough time. Now the sauce this isn't quite the same as you'd get at the restaurant. I use some tomato paste and San Marzano tomatoes. Typically, Lou's would use stewed tomatoes with no extra tomato paste, but the sauce is up to you. I think my sauce is personally better. So I use 1 can of tomato paste, 1 can of San Marzano tomatoes, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 1 teaspoon of oregano, 1 tablespoon of Italian seasoning, 1 teaspoon of sugar, a teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of red pepper flakes, and then a teaspoon of MSG. And part of the thing with deep dish pizza sauce, all of them you do not cook them at all. You just combine the ingredients. You let the oven cooking do it all. There's all my seasonings all measured out already. Dumped it in. We're leaving some of the tomatoes in the can. I'll show you why we're doing that later on. Now just quickly put it on the food processor for about 10-20 seconds, just to combine all the spices and crush up all the tomatoes. Scrape all the seasoning off the side that's just been sticking there, and run it again. Alright, now we got our pan. Deep dish pizza pans are different. You can get them on Amazon. Mine was like 20 bucks. I think this recipe's for 14-inch. Now we're going to take our stick of butter and just run it around the pan just so it doesn't stick to the bottom. Typically you'd use olive oil spray or shortening, but here we're using butter to give it that buttery flavor on the crust. Get it all the way around so you don't stick anywhere, so it comes right out of the pan. One thing also, we use deli cheese in this, and it's got to be fresh sliced, low moisture, Mozzarella, don't get anything prepackaged, it just will not taste the same. So here's our dough. It's been in a bag with olive oil. You can see it is still rather sticky, but it's sticking to itself better. It's not a typical pizza dough, and it does spread out very easily. You just use your hands here. Obviously wash your hands first because you're going to be using your hands for the whole time while making this pizza. So use it to spread it out to the edges and thinly try to get it crisped up on the sides and pull it up. It'll want to slide back down, but just as you're making it, just keep pulling it back up. Keep working it up. Make sure there's no holes where sauce can get through to the bottom. And we're going to start putting our mozzarella on now. Like I said, use only deli sliced mozzarella. I use about 3/4 of a pound, and you can see how much that is here. Regular thickness, not thinly sliced. Sort of layer it on top of each other, so no kind of sauce or toppings, whatever. Make it down to the crust. Your crust will get all soggy when it's baking there. Start preheating your oven when you first start to make it, because it takes a while to get to that temp. You're going to want to use a pizza stone in there. Put the pan on top of the pizza stone and then preheat it to 550 degrees. Here I didn't quite have it that hot. I had it at 525 or 25 minutes. As you can see, it gets a bit overcooked. But further experimentation shows 550 for 20 minutes is the ideal temp and time for a 14-inch. Obviously baking will vary with a 12-inch. Cover all, you don't want to see any dough on the bottom. You want a full layer of mozzarella. You want to use shredded cheese. Don't get pre-shredded. Get a block and shred it yourself. There's a bunch of cornstarch and extra things they put on the shredded cheese to keep it from sticking and from drying out, and it doesn't quite melt or taste the same. Now we're going to start putting our sausage on in bits and uncooked. You're going to take little chunks off and then flatten it down and try to give a flat, even layer covering the whole thing. So that right there is about a pound of Italian sausage, and then always check the description below for the recipe, because I will make changes to this recipe if I do make changes in actuality as I continue to try to get closer and closer. Some of you may find this a little bit gross, but now we're going to spread the sauce by hand. It is the best way to do it to make sure you get a even layer. And as long as your hands are clean, who really cares? You're going to bake it in extremely high temperature anyways to cook the meat and cook the sauce. Make sure you don't get any on the pan itself, or it will burn the crust to the pan, and you do not want that. You want to be able to just pull the pizza out in one big sheet. Now here's why we save some of our tomatoes on the bottom. You want to just spread them out in uncut, full-size tomatoes, similar to what they do in the restaurant. Obviously they use a different kind of tomatoes. They use stewed tomatoes, and I do not believe they use San Marzano. I do not know for sure. And so just lay some big chunks on top of there. And now we're going to go ahead and add a couple extras on top of that. You're going to add a thin layer of Parmesan cheese, just to give it some color on top, a little bit extra flavor. And then we're going to go ahead and add some Italian seasoning on top and some crushed red pepper on top before we cook it. This is optional. Typically you just add that on after it's done, but I like to do it before it's cooked, so if everything sort of combined flavors. Pan grabber is 100% optional. So 20 minutes later, cooking, or in my case, 25 minutes later, cooking at 525, it comes out. You can see the crust is a little bit overdone, but if you had it at the 550 for 20 minutes, it'd be perfect. If you have any recommendations to make this closer to the actual recipe, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.